Testing, hello. Okay. As we're lining up, folks, just to go over some of the quick rules here, it is make sure your question is a question, one question per person, and in the interest of time, follow-up questions will be at the discretion of Mr. D'Souza.
All right. Thanks for coming. This university, it's kind of like oil and water having you come to the university here because it's very liberal, to put it mildly. So to have you here, you've kind of thrown out some fairly incendiary facts or claims. The year before the Civil War, not a single Republican owned a slave. The big switch is a lie. Nixon's strategy is a hoax. We hear a lot about fake news, and you're talking about fake history. But I only hear you talking about it. Why don't I hear others? I don't see conservatives out in the street with their children's history books, burning them in a pile. I don't see students here at this university taking their history books and complaining about the falsehoods in it. So why is that? And would you be willing to come to this university and debate our top scholars on these topics?
The answer is absolutely yes. Not only do I welcome that opportunity, but I will debate up to 6 opponents at the same time. My leading public critic on this, the Princeton historian Kevin Cruz, who says things like there was a big switch, and then when I point out to him that there wasn't, he says, what about Jesse Helms? What about Trent Lott? What about John Tower? And I say, well, let's not debate apples and oranges. Those men are not Dixiecrats. Just to find a Southern Democrat who became a Republican isn't going to make your case. You have to find racist Dixiecrats and show me that those guys, who are countable. If you Google racist Dixiecrats, a whole number of names will come up on your phone. We're talking about those guys. And so I told Kevin Cruz, why don't I come to your home campus, Princeton University? Let's have a debate in front of your own students. You have all the advantages of being on your home ground. You're going to have the home team advantage. His response, I won't do it. He refuses. He says it's not the proper format to resolve these issues. Think of it. Debate is not a proper format to resolve an important difference of agreement. And I take that to really mean that what he's saying is, look, here at Princeton, we have enough leftists in the history department that we've got our students completely brainwashed. Your type is not going to be welcome here because the only thing you can do is make converts, and that's going to be incendiary for us. So we're not going to let that happen. So the bottom line, this is a scary time we're living in. Now, to answer your bigger question, why only me? I will say, I think this is partly because I'm an outsider to the country. In other words, when you come as an immigrant, there are things in America that are natural to the natives because they seem normal. They're American. But the immigrant comes in and goes, wow, that's strange. So someone told me LBJ used to be a racist in his old Texas days. And then, miraculously, he saw the light. He became an enlightened progressive. He signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this is a metaphor for the whole Democratic Party. And I thought, interesting. Usually when people have a tremendous moral conversion going from this end to this end, they give us a powerful account of it. Where's LBJ's account of how he saw the light? It doesn't exist. Then I pick up Robert Caro's biography of LBJ. I start reading through it. And I realize that LBJ was using the N-word regularly after he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Boom! And right away I go, that makes no sense. This guy did not convert. His support of the Civil Rights Act was tactical. Tactical. And then I say, all right, let me find some biographies of LBJ so I can learn more. Surely there have been some critical biographies that try to blow the whistle and answer the question of how somebody who supposedly is this racially enlightened person could be regularly using the N-word after the Civil Rights Act. Not in the 30s, but in the mid-60s. Turns out all the biographies of LBJ I can find are written by leftists. Robert Dallek, I think Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote one. There are others. Leuchtenberg wrote one. And so there is no critical biography of LBJ. My wife went to Texas State, which is LBJ's alma mater, lionizes LBJ. LBJ Library, LBJ Street, LBJ Tree, and so on. Fake history. fake history. So bottom line of it is, I find myself having to do a lot of this work at the ground level. I found out the stuff on fascism. Look, I'm an educated guy. I went to Dartmouth. I worked in the Reagan White House. I was a think tank scholar for 20 years. All the stuff that's in my movie about fascism, I had no idea about. But I read the historian John Diggins' book called Mussolini and Fascism, a very obscure book. You have a hard time finding it. It's not in any Barnes & Noble, I'll tell you that. And it talks about how FDR loved Mussolini, and Mussolini admired FDR, and the Nazi newspapers were praising the New Deal. And I'm like, why? Not just why don't I know this, why doesn't every intelligent person in the United States know this? And then it hit me, because the progressives who dominate academia have left it out. They're not lying. They just decided it will be very embarrassing to our side for these facts to come out. Let's leave them out, and no one will be the wiser, at least until Dinesh comes along. So that's my story. Okay.
Oh, okay, sorry. Hi. It seems as though you're trying to point fingers at the Democratic Party. As an individual that has grown up in an alt-right area, I am no stranger to listening to other opinions, so I appreciate you coming out and saying your opinion. I just think that you're pointing a lot of fingers at us currently, and I feel as though as a nation, the Republican and the Democratic Party should be working together, not pointing fingers rather, but coinciding and working together to create bills and better plans for our country. And I think this is the way that we can fix America. How do you feel about that?
I agree 100%. I'm a product of the Reagan years. If you remember, Reagan and the Democrats legislated tax bills together. They did Social Security commissions together. They did a tax reform in 1986 together. There was a lot of bipartisan support for the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Gorbachev and the Russians. Not that there wasn't disagreement, but there was the ability to work together. And the media reflected that debate. CNN, for example, had a famous show, Crossfire, and they would have Pat Buchanan on the right, Michael Kinsley on the left. That's the America I came of age in, and I long for it now. The reason, but we don't live in that America. Think of it, would CNN today dare to have a show in which they had, let's just say, for example, me against Rachel Maddow? I mean, a debate, admittedly, that would be more like one hand clapping, but nevertheless, they wouldn't dare. And they won't, when they cancel Crossfire, they decided to go full left. They'll have a panel of 8 people, they're all anti-Trump. They don't allow debate. So how do you expect to have compromise when the mainstream media has arrayed its guns against Trump? And they see their job as trying to take him out. If you want to know why I seem passionate now and not quite the same guy I was in 1985, it's this. I always thought American politics was a fair-minded debate between reasonable people who disagree, and I wrote and conducted myself that way. But then when I went through what I did with the Obama administration, when I stood in a courtroom and heard a bailiff go, United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza, when I began to deal with these people, I realized we have seen a gangsterization of the US government. I will tell you, based upon the deepest bone in my being, that if the Obama administration could have locked me up for 20 years, for giving a $20,000 political contribution, they would have done it. They would have been delighted to do it because they did not see me as a critic, but as a deadly enemy that they needed to take out. That was the way they looked at it. And so I'm saying, you're very naive if you don't realize that this is going on in America. Today, we don't live in an America where if the government comes after you, they're not going to send 2 gentlemen with a file to talk to you. They're going to send police cars, helicopters overhead, automatic weapons, and until it happens to you, you won't believe it. But when it does happen to you, you do become politically somewhat radicalized because you realize this is going on in our America, and we do need, before we can have compromise, we need to stop it. So that's my answer.
Rebuttal?
Sure.
Okay. So you talked about CNN as a mainstream media source, which it is. Many liberals use CNN, and many moderates also use CNN. I also find myself not seeing a lot of Republicans use CNN, but they do use Fox News, and I think that you can lump that into mainstream media. So how do you just attack CNN right now instead of focusing on how Fox News is full of Republican values, Republican traits? Bill O'Reilly was a sex offender. His show was taken off air. Like, how do you feel about that? Because that's definitely an issue that you're not addressing right now.
all of this has a context. So let's look at Fox News, your very example. The reason we got Fox News is that prominent conservatives were never featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, NPR. The whole ensemble of public outlets would not allow this point of view to go out. So Roger Ailes, who founded Fox News, said, listen, if we're right that mainstream media is serving only half the country and not the other half, there should be room for a conservative cable channel that addresses a different set of values. So here's what I'm saying. Fox News was created as an answer to a problem. Just like Trump. Trump didn't create this division. It created him. Republicans for years said, we've appointed one Boy Scout after another, Bob Dole, Mitt Romney, John McCain. And these guys get beaten to a pulp. They get beaten to a pulp no matter how good guys they are. So you know what? We're finally going to appoint a guy who actually has huge guts, pays no attention to the other side, a little bit of a guy kind of like you guys, who's going to respond to you the way you respond to him. A little bit of a mob boss, if I have to put it frankly. But a mob boss is needed to deal with other mob bosses of the Eric Holder stripe. That's how we got Trump. Trump is the response to the problem, not the creator of the problem. Okay, let's keep moving. I just want to give other people a chance, and I'll try to go a lot faster.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Earlier tonight, you talked about how the KKK, they were Democrats. How would you respond to David Duke openly supporting Donald Trump?
I would respond in this way. It's very interesting that in the entire ensemble of the KKK universe, a universe that, by the way, started in the 1860s, I bet you if I probe you, you can't name a single other leader of the Klan, can you?
Probably not, no.
Probably not. Here's why. Because if we made a list of all the KKK leaders from 1866 to now, all the grand wizards and grand Kleagles of the Klan, and listed them all and wrote their party affiliation right next to it, do you realize that 95% of them would be Democrats?
All right, but I'm talking about the one now. Like, how do you
Right, because it's very important for you. This is what I call fake history. You cling to the one guy and you try to use the exception to create a new rule. Even though the generalization applies on the other side, you get to hide that fact by pointing to this one guy. If you can pin David Duke on Trump, you get to excuse all the Democratic lynchings and murders and hangings. There were Democratic barbecue parties while people were hanging from trees. You get to cover all that up and take all that vicious history and pin it on Trump, even though he has nothing to do with it. He grew up in New York City, for God's sake, and in Queens. And you get to blame that guy for all this stuff that people like the Clintons were part of. Clinton's mentor was Orville Faubus, the Arkansas governor, who stood in the Arkansas schoolhouse and blocked black children from getting in. You hear the media talking about that? No, because they cover up for people like Clinton and Obama, and they try to flip the blame onto Trump. So this is the transaction I'm trying to blow the whistle on.
Right. I'm not talking about back then. I'm talking about now.
I'm talking about now also.
All of the white nationalists.
All of the white nationalists?
Can
you name three?
I'm not a history major. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to ask you right now, it's like, why do they support Donald Trump?
They don't. I'm telling you as a fact that the vast majority of white nationalists today do not support Donald Trump. I defy you to prove that assertion.
I can pull up some videos.
You've watched videos, exactly, because the Charlottesville deal was put on by an Obama guy, Jason Kessler.
So look, you got to...
Pardon?
Is it a conspiracy then?
It's not a conspiracy. It is a staged event. The Kavanaugh event wasn't a conspiracy. It was a staged event to destroy an innocent man.
Charlottesville staged event.
Someone put it on, didn't they?
I mean, you're making it sound like it's a conspiracy that was put on by
Not a
Democrats.
conspiracy. Look, no. When people work together to a common goal, it's not a conspiracy. They're just working in the same direction. So let me give you an example. I'll give you an example that explains exactly what we're talking about. Saul Alinsky, who was the mentor of both Obama and Hillary, was approached in the 60s by a group of leftists who said to him, there's a Republican speaker coming to town. We are going to go with stickers and posters that say that the speaker is a Klansman. And Alinsky said, don't do that, that's stupid. Alinsky said, go to Bed Bath & Beyond, buy some white sheets and plug some holes into it. You guys all dress up in Klan outfits. Come to the Republican speaker's event, and while he's speaking, you jump up and down and cheer wildly. What Alinsky was basically saying is, let's stage it. Let's pretend like here are these Klansmen and they all support the Republican, and here's the killer. Alinsky goes, the media will be there and they will play along. They will treat this as legitimate news. They will use it to smear the right, and we will get away with it because they're on our side. A fake news event, brilliant in a certain way, I have to admit, but Alinsky was a total thug and a liar. He admitted he got his ideas from the mafia, and Alinsky says, he goes, listen, he goes, Alinsky knows that the Klan was started essentially by a delegate of the Democratic Party. It was revived by a Democratic president, Woodrow Wilson. He knew all that. His point was, how do we escape the blame for it and pin it on the other guys? That was what was going on. That was going on in the Kavanaugh hearings. Think about this woman who now says, I made it up, right? What was she doing? She was confirming Susan Ford. Now she admits, I never knew Kavanaugh. I made the whole thing up. But think of it this way. She was hoping to be a civil rights heroine. She was hoping that even people who suspected that she was lying wouldn't care. They wouldn't check her out. They wouldn't look for her high school yearbook. They wouldn't interview her friends, and they didn't. They didn't. It took the investigators of the Judiciary Committee to find out after the fact that the woman admits she's lying. That's what I call a staged event. What else do you call it?
I wasn't taught. I don't know. I can't. You go ask me honestly. It's just like
You really think? Okay, let's use our common sense here. You really think that a group of white nationalists who know, and Klansmen who know that if they have a rally today in the Klan, if you have a rally with 100 people, there'll be 700 protesters. You think that they seriously thought they could have a conference called Unite the Right? Unite the Right. They're going to have everybody from the National Review to the Weekly Standard, the Heritage Foundation, the Hoover Institution. They're going to unite the right by having a white supremacist rally. You really think that's what they thought? I mean, if you did that, you were born yesterday.
I'm not going to try to argue on this. All right. I just wanted to hear your opinion. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's it. I'm just giving it to you. All right. Let's go to the next one.
So good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm actually visiting from Utah, and we're excited that we're finally sending Romney to Washington. Still waiting to hear back about that love race, but we'll hope that she wins as well. So my question for you really quick is essentially, how do we harness the energy in the conservative movement that is really kind of knocking down this idea on the left, the identity politics of if you're a minority or a part of groups XYZ, that you're automatically a blue vote. Because, I mean, for example, I just saw, I think the first time they've ever done this, they had the Young Black Leader Conference with President Trump. I believe Turning Point USA organized that. And just a lot of other evidence that there's a growing movement in the conservative side of things. So how do we harness that energy, and how do we get that out in the mainstream when a lot of the mainstream, like you're saying, won't cover it?
First of all, the way that the Democrats sustain this loyalty, high degrees of loyalty from minority communities, is they flat out lie to them about their own history. This may seem like an audacious thing to do, but they do it. For example, it is widely believed, for example, among young African Americans, that blacks who used to be Republicans in the old days became Democrats because the Democrats were the party of civil rights. This is widely believed by blacks and a lot of whites, and it's taught as true. Yeah. It is factually untrue. And my proof of this is very simple. All you have to do is look at the 1930s. In 1932, FDR got 1/3 of the black vote. And Herbert Hoover, the Republican, got 2/3 of the black vote. 4 years later, in 1936, FDR got 75% of the black vote, and the Republican candidate got less than 25. The switch did not occur in the 60s. It had nothing to do with civil rights. It had everything to do with the Great Depression and the economic hardships of it and the economic benefits of the New Deal. Now, it's not quite as romantic to tell people that story. And the left wants to manipulate the lie to its political benefit and show that the Republicans are the party of haters. So to do that, you have to lie to people and say, listen, it didn't happen in the 30s, when, even though it demonstrably, empirically, factually did. It actually happened later, when blacks saw the Democrats became their friends. So what I'm getting at, this is lie upon lie. I mean, if even 1/3 of what I've told you this evening is true, a lot of the stuff that you knew to be true is false. And I understand in a certain way why people get discombobulated and walk out, because it's actually not that easy to re-examine a lot of your assumptions. It's okay to re-examine this or that, the tip of the iceberg, but if somebody tells you that something that is a core belief of yours, things like your parents are not your parents, you know, that's going to take not just an intellectual but an emotional transformation for you to be able to get your head around that one. That's the kind of stuff I'm putting out, and I'm only trying to sow some seeds and get you to check things out yourself. Next question.
Hi. As a conservative and an alumni of the Leadership Institute of Morton Blackwell, I'm sure you know, you worked with him in the Reagan administration, I had to force myself to watch your movie, and I wanted to get your comments on some of the aspects of the movie that I eventually walked out of. First, I wanted you to clarify the context of the disgusting portrayal of Malcolm X that's in your film, and then furthermore, the blackface caricature of Frederick Douglass in the film. When you're talking about Frederick Douglass, there's a blackface actor. I wanted you to touch on that.
Certainly. I'm very sorry you walked out of the film, because the truth of the matter is there was no blackface. There was no blackface actor. That scene in the Frederick Douglass in the movie is actually taken from my America movie, which I made 2 years earlier. We filmed Frederick Douglass. It's a black actor. He's listed in the credits. He's taken credit for the movie. He's come to our premieres. So just because of the lighting, someone got the crackpot idea that we were using a white actor playing blackface. They put it out in social media. Fake news. Forget about it. It's not true. Okay. And then you said something about Malcolm X. Now, what's interesting is that when I interviewed the white nationalist Richard Spencer, he brought up Malcolm X. He goes, if black people can affirm their identity and do what they want and be proud of who they are, why can't white people be proud of who they are? And why don't we have white identity politics? And so I asked him, I said, if you met Malcolm X, do you think you guys would get along? He goes, oh yeah, I would get along great, because he supported separation of the races. I support separation. What I'm getting at is, my point for using Malcolm X was simply to illustrate the point that this white nationalist was claiming to be doing nothing different than what the black nationalists do. This is a legitimate depiction in a movie. Movies are not the same as books. In a movie, if someone talks about Malcolm X, I show Malcolm X, because I want people to get movies are a visual medium. And there's nothing wrong in doing this, and the audience is in a perfectly intelligent position to see if what Richard Spencer is saying is true or false. I put it out there. I let people think about it. I have nothing to be ashamed of on that score. Next question.
This next question will be our last question, folks.
In the Charlottesville riots, many protesters and rioters were wearing MAGA hats and T-shirts, but yet you say they're part of the left or Democratic Party. And just by a quick Google search of the Charlottesville riots, it was called the Unite the Right rally. Can you please explain that?
Yes, I'll explain it. The Unite the Right rally was the organizers who put it up. The people who staged the rally were doing the ultimate of fake news. And let me tell you why they were doing it. Why would somebody take a guy, let's explore Richard Spencer, since I've gotten to know him somewhat. What's he up to? What's he trying to do? The truth of it is, he is a white nationalist. He is also a statist. He believes, he's even said publicly, I like socialism, but he's a national socialist. No surprise. He has a certain affinity with neo-Nazism, National Socialism. He's on the left. He knows that. But he also knows that as a white guy, he is unwelcome at the multicultural picnic. Because in today's left, every ethnic identity is affirmed except whites. He knows that he's the villain of the progressive narrative today. And so he thinks to himself, I'm irrelevant. I have no place on the right, because the right doesn't believe in identity politics. They don't affirm white nationalism. Yes, they affirm nationalism, but it's American nationalism. So what do? How do I become a really important person? And then he gets a diabolical idea. What if I play along with the left's idea of who I am? What if I play the part of a Trump-supporting white nationalist? I will become one of the most famous people in America. I will become so radioactive that when I go to Florida to speak, I meaning Richard Spencer, the governor will declare a state of emergency as if I were some sort of a hurricane. And in fact, that proved to be true. Richard Spencer went from a nobody to being a nationally prominent figure by essentially giving the leftist media what they wanted. They wanted a script where they could pin white nationalism on the right. That's why it's so important for him to wear his Trump hat. He doesn't agree with Trump. If you listen to my interview with him, it's obvious he disagrees with Trump on everything. And he admits it. But he plays the script because it vaults him. It's not the first time. This is why I mentioned a couple times the Kavanaugh hearings, because people say, well, why would someone make it up? I can think of 1 million reasons why, if one were to look at the GoFundMe page. It's very profitable. I submit to you a thought experiment. If Susan Ford had, let's just say, said a year later, like this other woman did, I made the whole thing up, I bet you there would be people on the left who would say, congratulations. Brilliant tactical strike on a really bad guy who might overturn Roe versus Wade. You are a civil rights heroine and you deserve an award. And this shows the level of deceitfulness to which our politics has actually reached. It's a politics that results in smears, false accusations. A couple of weeks ago, I guess now, I was speaking at Liberty University. I was talking about LBJ, and I said that LBJ used the N-word, except I used it because I was quoting LBJ. And I said, I'm not getting this from some dubious source. I'm getting this from Robert Caro and Doris Kearns Goodwin, and I cited my sources, and boom, the next day on a leftist Christian website, D'Souza uses the N-word. I was quoting LBJ. It was blindingly obvious but they were doing this because they thought it's so incendiary that if the mere accusation will cause other people to jump on it and will destroy Dinesh's career because he used the N-word. The problem was that when they clipped the video, even the shortened video that they showed made it obvious that I was quoting LBJ. And so their own viewers were like, didn't you see the video? He's quoting somebody else. And if that makes him the user of the N-word, then you've used the N-word because you just quoted him. So this kind of lowball tactics is now the America that we live in. And it's come into academic discourse. And it's very terrifying because no real discussion can occur without it. I'm going to give you the last question since you seem so determined and you knew it was the last question, but you're sticking your neck out. So you get to ask the last question and I'll wrap up. Go ahead.
Hello, Mr. D'Souza. My name is Miranda Rispoli Sotomayor. I'm a proud Latina. I'm a proud come from a proud family of immigrants, and I'm an even prouder Democrat. And my question here today is based off a comment that you said earlier. You said that the merits of the Three-Fifths Compromise is up for debate. So who are you, or who is anyone, to debate the merit of one's humanity? How can you deny the legacy the Three-Fifths Compromise has had and that slavery has had on the extent of racism in the United States?
Look, right here in the first row, I think she got up. There's my wife, Debbie. She's from Venezuela. Her mom is Mexican-American. I'm married to a Latina. She's a first-generation immigrant. I'm a first-generation immigrant. So we're all coming to America and trying to make sense of all this. Now, quite honestly, I think you would have to admit that I have done nothing in this talk today to either minimize or downplay, far from downplaying racism. I've stressed it. I'm simply pointing the finger of blame where it belongs, and you're trying to hide it. See, the difference is, because you are a Democrat, you are willing to overlook the crimes of the Democratic Party. But let me tell you this, the Democratic Party is in fact, the party of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan and lynching and all the horrors of American history, including complicity with fascism, the internment of the Japanese Americans in World War II, the reigniting of the Klan in the late teens and 20s. All of this was done by Democrats, and they were opposed all along the way by Republicans. So the problem is that today, if you're a Democrat, you're a committed Democrat, you like the welfare state, you like Obamacare, or you're a progressive historian, you are in the awkward position of having to confess to a whole series of crimes that your team did. Crimes, by the way, that the Democratic Party has never admitted, never apologized for, never paid 1 penny of restitution for. So this is a very ugly position to be in. And the only way to do it is to lie through your teeth. hide the actions of the Democratic Party, blame everybody else. America did it, the white man did it, the Southerners did it, everybody except the guys who actually did it. So my point is this: you look after this talk and see if the specific allegations I've been making. Someone mentioned one, and I'm going to close with this one. I said, because I was speaking on a campus, and I'll close with this, and I was pointing out the Democratic Party's complicity in slavery, something that's, by the way, routinely denied. But once I make my case, the professor stands up, and I realize I kind of had him, so he goes into what I would call defense mode, and he goes, Dinesh, your talk is extremely simplistic. He goes, you are pointing the finger of blame at the Democrats, and you are ignoring the fact that there was plenty of blame to go around. So this is the fallback position. Everyone's to blame. And I realized that when this happens in a debate, it's really important to crystallize the argument and settle it. And so I said to him, and I'm saying to you now, that in 1860, which was the year before the Civil War, I said, no Republican owned a slave. Now, I did not say no Republican leader owned a slave. I said no Republican in the United States owned a slave. And what's so crushing about this, if true, is that it destroys the argument. It puts the blame of slavery entirely on one side. It shows that the 4 million slaves in America in 1860 were every single one of them owned by a Democrat. And the beauty of this statement is that it requires only a single counterexample to refute me. All you have to do is give me the name of one Republican who owned a slave. I would have to take it back. But to this date, years later, no single valid counterexample has ever surfaced. A few months ago, a guy from the University of Michigan wrote me, he goes, Dinesh, I got you. Ulysses S. Grant inherited a slave on his wife's side. And I replied and I said, well, this would seem to be kind of a touche, and the facts as you state them are true, but at the time that this happened, I have to point out, Ulysses S. Grant was a Democrat. He became a Republican later. And so, again, if what I'm saying is true, a lot of the nonsense that you have been spoon-fed is false. Listen. Listen, you can talk to my wife later. She'll be happy to talk to you in Spanish, but or then speak English, because that's the language I understand. You're not going to beat me by throwing Spanish at me. I'll reply in Hindustani. How's that? How's that for you? What is this, language trumps? I'm willing to listen. Go ahead. I'm listening. Go for it.
All right. Here's my question to you. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
First of all, I'm a fan of yours. I just figured if I acted like a baby liberal, you'd listen to me.
What? What is this? Fake news?
I mean Puerto Rico, so I'm Caribbean just like your wife. Here's my question to you, it's very important to me, to my heart. Even though I'm an American citizen, I come from a different culture, and I commend all Americans because you got the greatest country in the world. My question to you as a conservative influencer, and by that I mean you are my Mount Rushmore of people who influence. Earlier on you mentioned about the plantations, and I noticed you mentioned every state, every city, Democrats control, and you failed to mention the plantation on my island, Puerto Rico. I'm going to do a little math on you. We American citizens by birth, so you and I are very similar, with the difference that you probably work hard for your citizenship that I did. So, my island for decades have a population of 4 million Puerto Ricans. There's so many Puerto Ricans in the United States that if you bring them back to the island, it will probably sink. However, and you can look at this fact, there's over 100,000 Puerto Ricans for the past 20 years. They are leaving the island by the 100,000s every year. Yet our population is still close to 4 million people. Reason is we breed as fast, if not faster than Mexicans. Sorry if I'm not. Now my question to you is, as an influencer and conservative, how is it that conservatives will never do a lecture like this in our island? Because as a former liberal, I came to this country thinking that whites and Republicans from the South were racist and had something against them, right? Which kind of like brings you a victim mentality. So if you make the math, and you saw it in the last election, the population, especially in places like Orlando, New York, you saw who just got elected in New York.
Yeah.
And Sonia Sotomayor, famous Puerto Rican liberal judge. So why is
All right, let me answer.
Why is it that conservatives doesn't seem to grasp the threat, and I don't mean a threat like we're a threat, because I'm not a threat, but I'm saying I used to be a little threat. I used to have this mentality. I'm not saying everybody in Puerto Rico has it, because again, we're 4 million people, but I'm saying the majority. I'm welcome anybody who wants to go to visit Puerto Rico, and you'll notice that, you know, everybody, the majority of people hate Trump, hate Republicans. I mean, same talking points. So why is it about, not Republicans, because that's a whole different topic, but what is it about conservatives that they don't reach out to this population? They worry so much about Mexicans coming into this country, yet you have a bunch of liberal plantation right next door where people can come freely, no problem, and vote for Democrats and ruin everything that you're working for right now.
All right, a very good question. And
Sorry, just a follow-up question.
by the way, guys, he's speaking here tomorrow night.
Sorry, and this is a little bit more of a challenge. Not
Sure.
because I'm against you, but because I respect you, I have to challenge you. I have watched all your movies, and I'm still don't know why, even though you're pointing the finger at the Democrats, which I don't like, I think they're a bunch of hypocrites, but I noticed that you always fail to mention the root cause of the problem for both conservatives and Democrats, which is the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank. In all of your documentaries, even in the Hillary's America, you mentioned Jackson as a Democrat. However, he fought the banks, and even Trump put his portrait back in the White House for a reason, because he's fighting the bank. I mean, I believe so, I hope so. That's the reason I voted. I hope you don't let me down. So that will be my second question to you as a challenge. Why is it that you never mentioned the Federal Reserve?
Well, I actually have written about the Federal Reserve. I'll be honest with you. A movie, and I'm making movies I'm not making them for Netflix, I'm making them for the theater. Movies, by and large, have to engage emotionally compelling themes. The history of the Federal Reserve, very interesting subject, very difficult to depict in a movie. So I write books that lay out arguments, but my movies are narratives. They're a story. And I admit that in a story, a lot gets left out. And in fact, think, for example, I'd love to put sources in my movie, footnotes, and I can't do that. It's a movie. People they take their family, they're going to, Saturday night. Now, I'll look for an occasion to come to Puerto Rico. In my own world, which is, Debbie, my wife, grew up in the barrios of South Texas. And it is a tragedy that the Republican Party of Texas, because they dominate the rest of the state, they never go down there. It's blue, it's Beto country, and it's terrible because those are conservative people down there, and they want upward mobility. And if you offered them a ladder to contrast with the Democrats' rope, they'd go for it. But no one goes down there to make the case. So in any event, Rafael Cruz and Debbie and I were going down to the barrios of South Texas later this month to make a presentation to 1,000 people. They've never had anything like it. We're in a small way trying to start that. But if you're asking, does it need to occur on a big scale? Yeah, I think that Trump needs to go to the inner cities. I think he needs to go to the barrios. I think if he can show that he can make America work for those people, and it's not just believe in the Constitution, the rah, 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 the Star Spangled Banner, don't take a knee. It's not that. You have to actually see the ladders of opportunity that's an alternative to the dependency of the Democratic Party. And if you do, then you have a real choice. You go, do I want to live my life in which I stand in line for cheese, and I go and have a social worker come and check that my family is okay? Or do I'm an independent, self-respecting, dignified person who wants to live my own life and be the architect of my own destiny? That's the America I came here for, and my politics is based on that. So that's the America I fight to defend. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.